Hi, everybody. I'd like to take this time to talk to everyone about the 2022-2023 off-season training program. This is a program that's getting you ready for the 2023 season, and it started October 31st, and it runs through most of the winter and into the spring, when we will start either the spring competitive program for Southern warm climate paddlers, or we'll start a spring-based program for people who live in more northern climates and aren't able to get on the water as soon as the people living in warm locations. So what I'd like to do is run over a bunch of things about the off-season program in the next 30 minutes or so, and then hopefully that'll answer a lot of the questions you have. If you have any further questions, you know where to find me. You just reach out to me in either convos on the Paddle Monster website, or you can just post your question in the Paddle Monster forum addressed to me in the on the Paddle Monster website, and I'll get back to you with the answers that you need. First and foremost, I think it would be appropriate to look at the objectives for the winter or off-season program. So let me share that screen with you, and we'll go right into the objectives. So first and foremost, the whole idea of off-season training is to take a step away from being on the water and making water work the centerpiece of your training. And it's looking a little bit more at off-season training, off the water training. So if you look at the objectives, I've got the first one is to develop non-specific aerobic fitness. So the difference between specific and non-specific fitness is specific is the fitness you need for your sport. And the only way to develop the specific fitness, the specific aerobic abilities for paddling is by paddling. The non-specific aerobic fitness that you build is through activities like land-based activities like running, cycling, cross-country skiing, swimming, cardio machines at the gym, whatever. And the reality is that those activities actually develop your aerobic ability to a higher level than paddling ever will. It's been demonstrated through VO2 max testing that if you do your VO2 max test on a treadmill and you're a halfway decent runner, you will score a higher VO2 max value running on the treadmill than you will paddling. And when I used to do VO2 max tests on a treadmill, I'd be 73, 74, and paddling tests that I did. Now this was in a sprint canoe. I've never done one on a stand-up paddleboard, but I have no reason to believe that it would be much different. In a sprint canoe, I was about 48. And the simple reason for it being much higher running than it is when you're paddling is that you use a lot more muscle mass running. You use your legs far more running than you ever will stand-up paddling. Even when you try to use your legs a lot like you should, you just don't use them to the same degree that you use when you're running. And so, legs being the biggest muscles in the human body, they're going to suck up, they're going to have a huge demand for oxygen to fuel the energy production, the production of the energy that's used to contract those muscles. And so they place a much higher load on your oxygen delivery systems, your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system. And so your VO2 max will read much higher in any kind of land-based activity that uses your legs. So running, cross-country skiing, cycling, and also activities where you have to support your own body weight, because then you, activities like running and cross-country skiing, as opposed to lying back on the recumbent bike, where you're not supporting as much of your body weight. The chair on the bike mechanism is supporting more of your body weight. The more of your own body weight you support, the more of the postural and the stabilizing muscles in your body you're using, and they will have a demand for oxygen as well. So long story short, the off season is a tremendous time to build a high level of fitness and a level of aerobic fitness that's higher than you're going to ever be able to build on the water. And that's why back in my sprint canoe days, the athletes that actually had some time off the water every year, or who didn't paddle as much through the winter season and did more of their work on land, usually performed better than the athletes that just paddled all year round, like paddle in the winter like it was the middle of summer. They were never quite as fit. They were very fit for paddling, but it's better to be exceptionally fit, period, and then convert that very, very high level of fitness to the into the specific muscles that you use for paddling. So we're going to take that same approach, and we've taken that the last number of years. I've asked people that live in warm climates to paddle only 2 or 3 times a week through the first part of the off-season training, and to do a lot more than they usually would of land-based work. And obviously for people who live in more northern climates where they're frozen off the water, you don't have a choice. You're going to have to do all of your work in land-based activities. And the message to you is, don't despair that you're not in the water. You're going to be really benefiting from the work that you do on land. So to get back to our objectives, we want to develop a really high level of this non-specific aerobic fitness. Specifically, we want to be able to increase, our VO2 max. But we're also going to, when the program intensifies, we're going to increase our anaerobic threshold and our aerobic power, again, which is our VO2 max. In the gym, we're going to develop basic strength, then submax strength, max strength, power, and power endurance. And that's really important for paddling as well, because stand-up paddling takes a good deal of strength for a couple of reasons. One is that the boards are fat. Even the narrowest flat water boards are fat in comparison to the sprint canoes I used to paddle in. And we used to do a lot of strength work for sprint canoe. And then the other reason that stand-up paddling requires a lot of strength is that when we hold our paddle, there's an awful lot of paddle length beneath our hand. And if you think about that, like in a sprint canoe, there was much less paddle beneath my bottom hand than there is on my stand-up paddle. And so the more paddle distance that you have beneath your bottom hand, the harder it is to pull, the stronger you need to be. And so, I mean, it's analogous if you're working in the garden to using a long-handled spade or shovel. And if you're going to be strong and be able to lift a lot on the end of the spade, you move your hands apart and you're able to dig in and really lift a heavy load on the end of the shovel. But if you lift with your hands really close together, you're very weak, right? Because there's too much shovel beneath your bottom hand. So getting back to stand-up paddling, it requires a good deal of strength. And anyone who doesn't work at developing their strength is going to be underachieving when it comes time to race. You will be giving something away to an athlete that is stronger than you are. So we really want to try to think about, in addition to developing our energy systems, our ability to produce energy aerobically primarily, because our races are long generally, and then also to develop the higher level aerobic fitness that's used for, like higher intensity pieces, sprints within long races, that type of thing, and even our anaerobic ability and neuromuscular speed. Those are all things that are important, but not so much as that aerobic base that's really important. It's foundational to everything you do. But in addition to all that, we need to be strong. And so we spend our time developing our aerobic ability. We spend our time in the gym developing our strength. In addition, for those that are able to paddle, you will be maintaining your specific aerobic fitness. So by that, I mean, you'll be at the level of the muscles, like the muscle fibers in the muscles you use for paddling. There are things that go on in muscle fibers where the energy for muscle contraction is produced in the mitochondria of these muscle fibers. And so when you train aerobically, there's adaptations obviously in your body that are sort of systemic, like you improve the ability of your lungs to process oxygen and get it into your bloodstream. You improve the ability of your heart to pump blood out to working muscles. But at the level of the muscles, you actually improve the oxygen transport within the muscle from the cell membrane to the mitochondria. You increase the number of mitochondria in the muscles in each muscle fiber. So there's more sites where this energy production of ATP, which is what is used to make your muscles contract. The number of those energy production sites increases if you increase the amount of mitochondria. And then you also increase the enzyme activity that's involved in producing that energy. So those adaptations occur in the muscle fibers specific to whatever activity you're doing. And admittedly, you can't work them as well for paddling if you're doing running. But for those that are able to paddle, you'll be able to maintain some level of that specific aerobic ability through your paddling. And then the other thing that you will be able to do if you're able to paddle all winter, and this is hugely important, is improve your technique. There are 3 pillars to performance in our sport. The first is your aerobic ability, or more broadly, your energy systems. The second thing is your strength. And the third thing is your technique. And technique is critical. I've seen a lot of athletes that are like paragons of fitness, extremely strong, but don't paddle well, and they underperform. And I've seen athletes that aren't really very fit, and maybe even aren't even that strong, but they have really good technique and they overperform. So it's going to be really important to improve your technique as well. I'm going to stop this share for a second, and I'm going to look at the periodization for the winter training. So the periodization is sort of how the off-season year is divided into training blocks or training phases, different types of training happening at different periods of time. And we'll look at the off-season training, and we'll actually look a little bit more broadly at the entire year to see where the off-season fits in with respect to the entire year, and kind of we'll look ahead to see where the different training blocks are going to be occurring through the competitive season as well. So let me just share the periodization with you. Here it is right here. And so I'm just going to move this into the center of the screen here. Okay, so there's 2 programs really, right, for the winter. We've got the warm weather program for those that can paddle all year round without being frozen off the water. And there's the cold weather program for those that may or may not have access to open water to paddle in regularly through the winter. Both programs, the off-season program, started October 31st. And for the warm weather group, the off-season program is going to run to January 29th. It's the first training block, and it's 13 weeks long. And again, I say here, it's a winter dryland focus. Doesn't mean you're not paddling, but you're paddling less than you will be paddling in the summer or in the competitive season. And so 2 to 3 times a week is plenty, and you should be spending the rest of your time working on land-based activities that support the objectives that we just looked at. Okay, and we're calling that the off-season program for you. Looking at it more specifically, you'll see that there's an accumulation phase that's 8 weeks long. It goes until Christmas, and that's where you're developing your aerobic base. And then we intensify the program a little bit from December 26th, Boxing Day, till basically the end of January. And we'll do some higher level aerobic work that's going to work on things like our anaerobic threshold and our VO2 max. Okay. And when you get to January 29th, we're going to start a new training block for you. We're going to call it the Spring Competitive Program, as we have in the last number of years. It's going to run from January 30th to April 30th. And so it's approximately 14 weeks. Primarily, the primary focus is on the water, and it's preparing you for early season races. If you are in North America, one of the biggest early season races is always the Carolina Cup, which is towards the end of April. Not sure what you're looking at in Europe, but this is, the periodization that we're looking at here is generic. It's based on when big competitions tend to be. And I should make it very clear right from the beginning before anyone gets worried. If your priority races don't match with this periodization, then you let me know in convos on the Paddle Monster website, and I'll work with you to adjust the periodization so that you are optimally prepared for your priority race date. So, normally Carolina Cup is at the end of April, so this spring competitive program culminates then. There's 7 weeks of accumulation training to work on specific aerobic base on the water. And then we intensify for 7 weeks, actually a little bit less than that, because there's going to be a peaking week or about 10 days of peaking at the end. But that is what their program looks like. And then for the people that can't paddle all winter, their off-season program lasts longer. So rather, it started October 31st like the warm weather program did, but rather than end on January 29th, it extends until March 12th. So another approximately 6 weeks, assuming that no one would be able to paddle over those 6 weeks. And so it's actually 19 weeks of dryland focused work. And even if you are able to paddle, again, likely it's maybe 2 to 3 times a week. That's a real bonus if you live in cool climates that you're able to do that. It's a great opportunity to continue to work on your technique through the winter, but the bulk of your focus through these 19 weeks should be dryland work, and you're going to be incredibly fit at the end of it. We're calling that, again, the off-season program. And then on March 13th, we're going to start a short block that's only 7 weeks in the water. We're calling it the spring base program. And we're going to sort of pack in a short period of time, enough paddling to help you perform reasonably well if you're racing at Carolina, say, for example, at the end of April. So you'll have about 4 weeks of accumulation and a couple of weeks of intensification to sort of get you ready for a spring race. It's really hard for people in northern climates to be optimally prepared for the Carolina Cup like you would be if this race was held, in the middle of August, because you haven't had the time on the water that people in warmer climates have had leading into the race. But we can still have you do really well, as well as possible given the situation, the environment you find yourself in over the course of the winter. And then after April 30th, like on May 1st, when the spring competitive program, the spring base program have ended, we're now into the summer program, and it's basically running from May 1st to August 13th. So that's 15 weeks, and we've got 8 weeks of accumulation, 7 weeks of intensification plus peaking if necessary at the end of it. And then the last training block runs from August 14th to October 29th, and it's the fall block, the one that many of you just finished, that's preparing you for major fall events, in a lot of cases a race like Chattajack. So it's much the same as other years, but I just want everyone to be able to sort of see the dates and get an idea of what lays ahead. For those of you that are curious about periodization and have read about it, these training blocks are analogous to what they call macro cycles. Over here where you see the accumulation and intensification, these are phases, training phases within each block. And these would be analogous to what they call mesocycles. And then each week of the program are what we call microcycles. One of the things you can expect as you go through each of these training blocks is that we'll have 2 weeks of high loading. Week 1 will be high load, week 2 will be incrementally higher load, and then we'll usually have a recovery week. And these recovery weeks are really necessary for a couple of reasons. The first is that they ensure that the work that you do in the high volume weeks is done, or the high load weeks, I guess we should say, that the work in these high load weeks is done with optimal quality. It's really difficult to train week after week after week after week after week with high load, high quality training without there being some decay in the quality that you're able to put into the training. And it's the quality, especially when the program intensifies, that creates the stimulus that leads to improvement. And so it's really important that we give our bodies time to recover just enough so that in the next 2-week high load cycle, you can train with optimal quality, because that's where the stimulus that's going to create gains comes from. The other thing, the other reason we want to have these recovery weeks is that if you don't take these recovery weeks, you're flirting with either injury or illness, because eventually, if you train week after week after week after week with high load, things start to break down. So whether it's muscles that end up getting injured or connective tissue, it can be a problem. And then it really prevents the likelihood of anyone overtraining. If you do end up overtraining, if you've ever overtrained before, you'll find that it's not enough to take a week easy, like a recovery week, and then be back to normal. Oftentimes, if you've overtrained, you have to take, 2, 3, 4 weeks either off or with greatly reduced training load. And that puts you a lot further behind in the long run. So, in the short term, you might be able to do 3 hard, like high load weeks instead of 2, or maybe even 4, maybe even 5. But eventually, if you hit the wall and you've overdone it, you're going to have to pay for that with some time off or with greatly compromised training thereafter. And it doesn't get you further ahead in the long run. So it's better to take the recovery weeks when they're offered, make the most of them. And the last thing that the recovery weeks do for you is they give you a chance to consolidate the gains that you made. So when you're training day to day at like a high training load, you do a hard workout, and a lot of your body's resources go to recovering from that workout in preparation for the next workout. When you aren't training as hard, when the training load is greatly reduced, like it is in a recovery week, the recovery required after an easier workout, like usually I cut the load by up to 50% or more in each workout in recovery weeks. That level of reduction in training load in an individual workout means that the amount of recovery required from that training session is much less. And so your body doesn't need to divert all of those resources that it normally would to recovery. And instead, what it can do is it can, some of those, your body's resources can go to consolidating the gains that you have made from training that you've already done. And so it's really like essential, to take these periodic recovery weeks, because again, it allows you to sort of solidify the gains that you've made and then build upon them in the next period of higher load work. Okay. So that's all got to do with the periodization. And if you've got any questions or concerns about it, reach out to me in convos on the website. And again, for those of you, I recognize that a lot of people in Europe are going to have, Europe especially, are going to have different competitive schedules. And that's fine. This training periodization is generic. It's based on what kind of most of our members have done over the last several seasons. But it's very easy for me to manipulate it if you tell me what your priority events are, right? And we all know that we can't make every race that we're doing a priority event, because we can't always be optimally prepared to do our very, very best. We have to pick and choose our spots where we want to be, like our very best, because it's just impossible to be the same every time we race. But if we're fit and if we've done our homework, we can be pretty good in the events that aren't our priority ones, that we aren't peaked for. It's just that our optimal performance, the best we can possibly do, is going to be in our priority events, right? And so I can help you. I can manipulate the periodization, essentially create your own personal periodization based on what your schedule requires. But you've got to work with me to do that, okay? And the way we'll do it is you'll tell me when your races are, and I'll look at the work that we are doing, and I'll figure out how we have to change this periodization to give you the chance to perform optimally in your priority event, okay? Last note I'll say is that, like, if you're doing any winter racing, and I know that like in winter, it says right here, it's a dry land focus. And even if you're able to paddle regularly in the winter, I want you off the water more, doing land-based work, paddling only 2 to 3 times a week. And so if some of you are doing winter races, and so one race that jumps to mind is the Glagla race. I can't remember the exact date of that, but it's going to be in a period of time when, if you're following this periodization, you're only on the water 2 to 3 times a week. I can work with you to help you be better prepared for that race and maybe find a little bit more water time for you, but I'll kind of debate you a little bit, or kind of put up a little bit of resistance if you want to paddle as often in preparation for Glagla as you do in the summer, because this land-based work, this off-season work, is crucially important, right? You're building the fitness foundation that's going to carry you through a long competitive summer season, right? If you look at the warm weather program, for example, the off-season is really only 13 weeks, which is going to go by like that. And then the rest of the year, is basically, it's basically 9 months. And so if you want to be paddling well 8-9 months later, it really is easier to do if you've got a really sound fitness base, a sound foundation. And if you start to get too excited about winter racing, and you start to train in the winter like you do all through the summer, you're losing an opportunity to build that foundation. And it may mean that you're marginally faster in the winter race, but you're compromising your performance and your ability to sustain a high level of performance throughout an entire paddling season, deep into the summer and into the fall. So you need to think about the bigger picture, right? If you're racing a winter race, and most people are going to be in the same boat as you. They're going to be in their foundational stage of training. And so it's rare that somebody is racing a winter race in peak form like they would be in the middle of summer. So again, you're going to work with me if you've got unique situations like this, and we'll figure out together how to have you best prepared for as well prepared as possible for whatever you're doing in the winter, without it compromising what you want to accomplish in the summer. Okay. So that's the periodization. So I'm just going to stop that. And I'm going to go back to the first slide where we were looking at objectives. And I'm just going to go to the next page here. So there's a few things, if you've trained with us before, there's a few things that are going to be new this year. I don't want to do the same program every single year for people that have trained with us for 4 or 5 or 6 years, because doing the same thing year after year after year after year, not only does it get a little boring, but it starts to get a little less effective, because if you're repeatedly subjected to the same work which your body's already adapted to, it doesn't provide you the same stimulus as new work might. So we're going to do some things differently this year. And the big thing that we're going to do this year is is just a second. I just got to check to see if there's a few people that want in, and let's stop this for a second. All right, let's go back to the what's new this year. The big thing that's new this year is circuit training. So in the last few years, we've done strength training twice a week for novice paddlers, 3 times a week for intermediate, and 3 times a week for advanced and elite. This year, we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to do the traditional paddle monster training 2 sessions a week. And then we're going to do 1 session a week, and additionally for novice and intermediate, that is a circuit. And then we're going to do 2 additional circuits for advanced paddlers. And so what that's going to mean is, if you're following the Paddle Monster program, on say Monday, you're going to do day 1. On Wednesday, you would do a circuit. On Friday, you would do day 2 of the Paddle Monster program. On Saturday, you would do a circuit. And then the next week, on Monday, you would do day 3 of the Paddle Monster program. Wednesday, you do a circuit. Friday, you would do day 1 again, right? So you're just gonna, you're not gonna do 3 of the Paddle Monster traditional programs that we've been doing for a number of years. You're not gonna do, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday of those workouts all in 1 week. You're gonna do the first 2 workouts in 1 week, then the third and the first in the second week, and then the second and the third in the following week. And you're going to put these circuits in between. Okay. Why are we doing circuit training? Well, circuit training is going to be strength work. It's going to be done with weights or your body weight. Generally speaking, there's going to be 10 to 12 exercises in each circuit. We call it a circuit because you don't do a set and then come back and do the second set of the same exercise and the third set of the same exercise. What you do is you do 1 exercise, 1 set, and then you go to the next exercise and you do a set, the next exercise, you do a set, the next exercise, you do a set, you go all the way through all 10 to 12 exercises, and then you come back to the top. So you do what we call a round. And we're going to do anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds. And generally, circuits are done with a little bit lighter weight, a little bit faster repetitions, and no rest. You basically run from station to station. So they are very good for building your power endurance. They can also be very aerobic, because if you're not taking, like sitting down and taking a minute to 3 minutes of rest between each lift, it suddenly becomes very aerobic. If you're doing 3 rounds of 15 reps, the whole thing might take 15 minutes, 20 minutes. If you're doing 5 rounds of 30 reps, it might take close to an hour. Okay. So it's going to be challenging. Circuit training is really hard. But what makes it, where you find your level is by A, the weight that you use, and B, the amount of time you take to get from station to station. And obviously your goal is to cut down the time between stations. And your goal is to use, to increase the weight over the course of the winter. But there will be instructions in each circuit about how heavy the weight should be. Actually, you know what? We'll go and we'll look at one of the circuits in a second, the one that's on the program right now that's getting you started. And then we'll discuss that more. As I mentioned, if you're advanced, you're going to be doing strength 4 times a week, because you're going to do 2 of the traditional workouts and 2 circuits. If you're a novice, you're going to gain an extra weight session by doing the 2 traditional workouts and a circuit. And if you're intermediate, for now anyway, you're going to do the same as the novice, just different weights and different exercises. You're going to do 2 of the traditional and 1 circuit. I'll get feedback from the intermediate group, and we'll see if we're going to go to add a second circuit. Okay. And then the other thing that's going to be new is we're going to do some combo workouts, like a circuit and cardio. So for example, when I used to do my canoe training, we'd do a circuit and a swim. We're fortunate enough that our gym had a good pool for doing lengths. But for a lot of you, it might be like a circuit and a run, or if you're training at a gym and you don't run, a circuit and hop on the exercise bike, that type of thing. And it's just, again, to increase your cardio base. Okay. So that's something to get, I hope, excited about. I'm going to stop that share, and we're going to look at the circuit that we're currently doing. So let me just share the circuit we're currently doing. If I can find it. Here it is. Okay. So this is a basic strength circuit, and this is on page 2 of your program. So there was page 1, week 1, and here's page 2. So this is a basic strength weight circuit. It's 15 reps per exercise. You complete one set and then you move to the next. So you go from station to station to station. When you get to the 12th exercise, you go back to the first. And your rest is only the time it takes to switch exercises. So, you get up from the bench press, you walk over to the bench pull, and you start hammering away at the bench pull. When you start to get really good at this, you will be basically running from station to station. So you complete the number of rounds indicated. Right now, we are doing, if you look on the program, it says that we're doing 3 rounds, right? So this week it's 3 rounds. The weight that you use, I don't want to say that it's 70% of your max weight or 60% of your max weight or whatever, because some people are able to crank out pretty fast reps at 80% of their max. Other people struggle to do crank out fast reps with 60% of their max. So rather than prescribe a percentage of max, rather than prescribe weight using that method, what I want to say is that you should be able to do 1 rep per second or faster, preferably faster. Like these should be done pretty aggressively at each exercise. And you should not be approaching failure. You should always have at least a couple of reps left in the tank. Ideally, you should be able to finish a set at a particular exercise at the same tempo, right, as you started the exercise with. I don't want you struggling to squeeze out the last couple of reps. We're not doing this the way we do like heavier weights. The idea of this is that we're going fast. Like it's like being able to maintain a consistent paddling stroke, right? You don't get tired after 15 strokes and your strokes start to slow down. You're able to keep your tempo going and going and going and going. So this is what we're looking at building here in a lot of the circuit training. And if the objectives are otherwise, the instructions will indicate that, okay? So the exercises right now are bench press. I think it's fairly straightforward. You've done that with the current strength work, bench pull, split squat jumps. I'm pretty sure there's split squat jumps are in on our the latest or one of the most recent editions of the Catch, our EMAG, had a leg circuit in it, and split squat jumps was one of the exercises. Side bends, I'll just go to the other room and demonstrate a couple of these. So side bends is basically, you can take a dumbbell or you can take a weight plate and you're going to hold it in your hand, put your hand in your hip, and you're going to bend and come up like that, right? You're only going to come up to straight. You're not going to go the other way. You're just bending over and coming up. If you look at it from the side, you're not lean forward, you're not lean back, your butt's under your head, and you're bending to the side, crunching your rib cage and hips together, and then coming up to straight, okay? And you're going to do 15 reps a side for that. Push-ups, we all know. Body rows, we should know because they are one of the exercises that we've done before in the Paddle Monster program. If you're unsure about body rows, I know there's a video of it on our site. Squat jumps are pretty straightforward. They are in the, I believe they're in the leg circuit as well. I'll just demonstrate them and split squat jumps. So split squat jumps are basically going to be like this. You're going to start like this. You're going to go down. Those are split squat jumps. And then squat jumps are just going to be like you're doing a squat and you're going to go up and down like that. Split squat jumps, 15 reps per side. V-tucks. Okay, V-tucks is one that you probably haven't seen, or you have, and you just maybe know it by a different name. So V-tucks, you're sitting, legs out in front of you, hands out in front of you, you're just going like, you're tucking in like that. Okay, I'll demonstrate it from the side. So it's a core exercise. Overhead barbell press, pretty straightforward. Lat pull down, pretty straightforward. Skating motion, that's in the leg circuit. That is in the catch. And crunches are pretty straightforward, right? We all know what crunches are. You're lying on the ground and just crunching up with your abs. So those are your 12 exercises. Where you're asked to do things like side bends and split squat jumps, you're doing 15 reps a side, okay? We're gonna be changing some of the exercises when we introduce new circuits. And when we do, I'm actually going to do an article for some of these circuits in the catch. So the December issue will have one of the circuits in it, and the January issue will have another circuit in it with videos of each of the exercises and explanations about it. So you'll have some information to work with as the circuits start to change, okay? So you won't be wondering, what you should be doing. You'll be able to have a resource that you can go to that has the videos and explains fully what you need to be doing, okay? So I'm just going to stop this share, and I'm going to go back to one more slide to share with you. And so that's this one. How can you maximize your success in off-season training? And it's really pretty simple, right? You do your homework. The first thing is that you do as much of the training as possible. I know that people miss training sessions. I miss training sessions. It's true that in my best years as a canoe athlete, those were the years where I missed the least number of sessions, right? But you do as much of it as you can. And you do it with as much quality and attention to detail as possible as well. So it's not just a case of, being there sort of physically and going through the motions. You need to concentrate and focus and really try to approach everything you do with, as much intensity as is required, and with real attention to detail. So by attention to detail, I'm saying, if you're doing circuits, make sure you count the right number of reps consistently. Running from station to station is better than walking. Using the right weight so that you are able to finish each set at the tempo that you're supposed to finish each set at. These are details. And if you take care of all the details and do the work as it was intended to be done, you tend to do better overall. Leave no stone unturned. And this isn't so much about the training that you're doing, because if you just follow the work, do as much of the work as you possibly can, and with attention to detail, that's going to take care of the work that you've got to do, right? But the leave no stone unturned is more about the things you're going to do between workouts, like the rest and sleep that you get, the quality of that rest and sleep, the quality of your nutrition, getting on top of any little injuries that you have sooner rather than later, seeking professional help when needed, like from a physiotherapist or a chiropractor or whatever, if you've got something that is bothering you and hasn't gone away. Think about ways that you can do little things, and if you do a bunch of little things, how they can become a big thing and make a big difference. If you have, for example, a hard time doing some of the cardio work, and yet you live in a location where it's possible to ride your bike to work, if you can't do the 30 minutes of cardio after a circuit, but you can ride your bike to work, and it's about a 40-minute or a 20-minute bike ride to work, but you would ride to work and back. Well, why don't you ride your bike to work? And that can sort of make up for the cardio session that you didn't do, right? When I was training canoe, I tried to do all of the work, obviously, that the coach put in the program, but I also tried to look at extra things that I could do, or like sort of lifestyle choices that I could make that would augment what the work I was doing in the training program. And so one of the things I did was I tried to ride my bike everywhere that was local rather than drive. And I logged a lot of hours riding around town on a bicycle that unquestionably helped improve my aerobic fitness. It was just like extra aerobic work. And so, this is something that you can do as well. And then the last thing is to become a student of technique, right? So we talked off the top about how important technique is. It's one of the three pillars of performance, the other two being strength and aerobic ability. And it's probably the most important one. And so, you're going to do all of this hard work in the off season and be super fit when the off season program ends and you start to get on the water more. And you'll notice a difference when you get on the water. This fitness that you build in the off season program, you will notice a difference with it when you get on the water. It will make you feel considerably stronger and able to do more work when you get on the water. But if you don't improve how you paddle, or if you paddle poorly, all of that hard work you've done won't reap you the benefits that it should. It will reap you more benefits if you paddle well, in addition to being super fit. And so, technique is one of the variables that's really hard for me to coach in most of you, because I don't see you paddle. And I know I work with some of you. I've done video analyses for some of you, and some of you I work more closely with on technique, but the vast majority of you I don't. And that's okay. But you can go a long way to helping yourself paddle better, right? And so the first thing that you can do is you can learn. So I encourage you to watch video, right, of good paddlers paddling. And you're going to see that they all look a little bit different because they're all different shapes and sizes. But if you start to look at things really closely, you're going to see that they all do a number of very similar things, right? So try to pick out what those similar things are and start to incorporate them into your own paddling. You should be reading about technique. So I know we put a lot of information out about technique on our website, in the catch. But there's other people putting good information out about technique as well. Read it, learn, take clinics, and don't just take clinics with the same paddler all the time or the same coach. Take clinics with different people and hear different perspectives. A lot of times different coaches will be telling you what sound to be different things, but they're actually telling you the same thing, but they're explaining it or expressing it differently. So it sounds different. But other times they're actually going to, you're going to learn things from one coach that you didn't learn from another. And so I strongly encourage you to take clinics. Video yourself regularly and sort of see how you compare to all the video that you watched of top level competitors, and kind of do a self-analysis. Look to see what you're doing and how it compares to what the top people are doing. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of you will pick out things that you can identify as things you can improve on. And And then once you've identified them, right, then you know what you got to work on and you can start working on it. And then lastly, if you do all of that and you still need help, then don't be afraid to ask for it. Okay. So I'm here and I'm always happy to answer questions about technique. I'm always happy to offer you some suggestions. I'm even happy to like do a quick glance at a video that you maybe upload into Convos. I'm not going to do a full analysis of it for you because I ask people to pay for a full analysis. It takes a good chunk of my time to do one. I'm happy to do that for you if you're willing to pay for it. The information about how to do that is on the site. And then you can always, go really in depth with it and get into the 8-week program. But I'm happy to offer, if somebody wants to send me a video and I'll take a quick look at it and I'll give you a few suggestions. Absolutely happy to do that. That's sort of part of what you're paying for. If you want beyond that, then that's a little bit different. You are taking a lot more of my time then, and I'm happy to provide it, but you'll have to pay for that. But I believe that there's a lot that each of us can do just on our own. Using the resources that are available and using our brains to paddle, improve the way we paddle and paddle better. And I strongly encourage you to take ownership over how you paddle and make some strides in that regard over the winter. And so even if you're a cool climate paddler and are frozen off the water all year, if you start looking at video and learning and thinking about maybe getting video of the last time, if you get video of yourself paddling from the past summer and you look at it and you see how you look different than the top people that you're whose videos you're watching, or what you're doing is different from what you're reading about, start to think about ways that you want your technique to change when you get on the water in the spring. And believe me, spending time working it through in your brain, thinking about it, visualizing it, is going to make it a lot easier to do when you get on the water in the spring. Okay, so that's a huge way that you can maximize your success and make use of your winter in a sort of a technique sense, and even if you're not on the water at all through the winter. Okay, so look, I know apparently some people were trying to get into this video and have been unable to. I don't know why, but this video will be posted. So when you're watching it, it will be on the website, and you will have already seen everything you need to see when you hear me say this. So, obviously, there's a big chunk of time ahead. And the last thing I'll say is that I have seen time and time and time again athletes, primarily in sprint canoe kayak, because I've obviously dealt with more athletes over the years in that sport than I have in stand-up paddling, but I've seen it in stand-up paddling as well. And that's I've seen paddlers come into the off season at one level, put in a fantastic off season of training, and come out at an entirely different level. Okay, and so that's, in many cases, that's been younger athletes that are really training hard for the first time, but I've also seen it with older, mature athletes who have never really taken their training to a super serious or high level before, and they do it for 3 months or 4 months in the winter, and they come out the other end and they're totally different. And as I said, you will notice the difference when you get back on your board if you're stronger and fitter. Okay. And then the last thing I'll just say is just one last thing is, I used to always think of myself when I was paddling canoe, I used to think of it like, imagine if I'm a Formula One race car. And so if you think of a Formula One race car, it needs a big, huge, high horsepower engine, right? Like these are all big, massively powerful engines that are, like literally like 1,000 horsepower or something. They're super, super strong. If you think about that, that's analogous to you being strong in the gym, right? And having a lot of strength to put into every stroke. You can gather a lot of water on your paddle, hold a lot of water on your blade, and you can work forcefully against it because you're strong. Okay, so that's obviously something you should be trying to do during the course of the winter. Build your strength, make yourself a higher horsepower engine. The second thing is these Formula One cars, they need really good fuel economy, right? So even though they've got these massively powerful engines, they want to be able to go around the track without having to keep going into the pits to refuel. Pit stops cost you time. And so the farther they can get around the track, or the greater number of laps around the track they can get without having to go into the pits to refuel, the better they're going to be in terms of race finish, right? So that fuel efficiency or fuel economy, that's equivalent to our endurance. And we improve our endurance for paddling primarily through developing a really high aerobic ability, right? And then once we've developed that really high aerobic base, it's our foundation. We can start to develop higher level aerobic abilities upon that, like increase our anaerobic threshold, increase our VO2 max, and that's the kind of thing that allows us to paddle it like at high intensity, level 4 or higher for extended periods of time without collapsing, right? So we want to do all of that kind of aerobic work so that we can increase our endurance, our fuel economy. If we do that, again, we're like the Formula One car. We've now got the big, powerful engine because we did our homework in the gym, and we don't have to pit stop as often because we've built up our endurance, right? And the last thing with these Formula One cars is even if they have a really powerful engine and they've got great fuel economy, if they don't have a good sort of setup, if the chassis of the car isn't set up right, the gearbox isn't right, they don't get the benefit of the horsepower in that engine, and they can't go around all the curves in the track well. They don't handle well. And so this is a little bit of a looser correlation, but I liken that to technique, because you can be super strong, you can be super fit as a paddler. But if you lack sound technique, then you don't get the benefits of your strength and your fitness when you're paddling. Okay, so in that sense, it's like the setup or the chassis or the suspension and the gearbox and all that kind of stuff in the Formula One car. And so we need to spend time, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, thinking about technique during the winter. And obviously, we want to be, spending a lot of time making sure we're paddling well when we are on the water. But even if you're on the water less in the winter, or you're not on the water at all, there's things you can do with regards to technique that's going to help make your technique better, or help you find a path to better technique when you get back in the water, or when you start to paddle more in the competitive season. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. And again, if after watching this you have any questions about the off-season program, about the philosophy, about the details, about the program from one week to the next, you know where to find me. Reach out to me on Convos on the website or the form, and I will answer your questions in detail. Okay, happy paddling.